Welcome to iteration 4 of the Computer Science 161 programming tutorial. In this iteration, we're going to focus on adding the reception options component to the GUI. You can see the reception options panel right here. It consists of a number of checkboxes that allow the user to select what additional options he or she wants to have with the package selected. So we're going to modify reception plan, our model class, to incorporate a data member for each selected reception option. And we're then going to run the program and verify that we get the correct GUI display and that the events associated with each of the checkboxes are handled correctly. With respect to our design, we are going to completely implement the reception options panel view class and its associated controller class, the checkbox listener. We're also going to make some modifications to the service panel to incorporate the reception options panel, as well as the reception plan to incorporate the data members required by the addition of this new panel. With respect to our design guidelines from the assignment, we are going to add some additional data members associated with input. We're going to define the appropriate setters and getters for them. Also, down here, we already have a method called init in reception plan, and it initializes the existing data members. We're going to add some data members, so we're going to have to add some logic here that reinitializes them. With respect to the services panel class, we are going to add an additional constituent panel, so I'll have to define a data member for that. We're going to have to slightly modify the constructor for services panel to add its new child panel. And that constituent panel that consists of those checkboxes may be selected or not selected. But when the reset button is pressed, they all must return to the deselected state. So we're going to have to modify the code of the services panel reset method to ensure that our new panel also gets reset. With respect to the reception options panel itself and its associated checkbox listener, we're going to address all these design guidelines. With respect to the GUI requirements address, we're going to address all the events associated with the options panel. So whenever an option is selected, the program's going to record that that option has been selected, and the way it's going to do that is going to modify some data member of reception plan. Similarly, when it's deselected, we're going to do the opposite thing. We already have addressed the reset button, so all we're going to need to do there is to ensure that our new panel sets its GUI components to its initial state, and that our reception plan, our model object, sets the additional data members to their initial states. The technical requirements we're going to address, well, with the reception options panel, it's going to be configured with the grid layout. It's going to have 5 checkboxes, one for each option. It is going to implement a checkbox listener to handle events generated by each of its checkbox objects. We're just going to create one listener, and we're going to have that listener handle events from all of the checkboxes. We're going to declare that checkbox listener as an inner class of the reception options panel, and it's going to be implemented as an item listener. Checkboxes are a little different than radio or action buttons. Those generate action events. the checkboxes are going to generate the state changed events. Alright, so we're going to have to implement the listener in a slightly different way. Alright, that's it for the introduction to iteration 4. Now let's go over and create the code. Well, the first thing I'm going to address is the changes we're going to need in the reception plan. We're going to need to add a data member to record each possible option. Since each possible option can be selected or not, there's just basically two states: on, off, yes, no, selected, not selected. So we're going to implement each of these data members as a Boolean, true or false. Okay, true if we want stake, false if we don't. So I'm going to just create 5 of these. We got cake, we got the center pieces, we got the chair covers, and finally we have the china. I'm going to create setters and getters for each of these. We'll let Eclipse do that for us. And let's see, let's put these after our constructor. Oh, no. Now we have to make sure we modify our init method to initialize those to their default values. And the default values for all of them are going to be false. Okay, so I'm going to just do a little copy and paste. There we go. That takes care of that. Then we need to go down here. I did this ahead of time, is I wanted to also add the possible display of those Boolean values, so we can ensure that those data members get set appropriately when the user selects them. Alright, the next thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and address our new GUI component. Okay, we know that this must extend JPanel. And we also know that it's going to have a listener. It's going to be an item listener. Alright, so we import that, and then we're going to have to implement the item state changed method. Alright, we'll get back to that in a minute. Alright, so this receptions option panel, it's going to need 5 checkboxes. So I'm going to create a data member for each of the checkboxes. all those declarations will be very similar. This class must also hold a reference to the reception plan. Okay, its associated model. All right, now let's work on the constructor. All right, well, the constructor is going to need a single argument. And we will save it. And then after we do that, let's go ahead and configure the J panel. So let's set its layout to a new grid layout. And it's going to have 5 rows, one for each checkbox, and they're all going to be within a single column. Let's see, what else do we need? Well, we're going to need a border. That says options. I got the wrong. I typed too fast. Gray title border is a member of the border factory, not the border layout. Okay. So next thing we do, as always, let's now instantiate the components that are going to be part of this J panel. Now we've got quite a label here. Okay, and I'm going to have a statement like this for each of my checkboxes. This parallel construction is rather nice. Figure out how to do one thing and use that as a pattern to do everything else. All right, so we got your cake, got your china, got your centerpieces, got your chair covers, and the label here is table centerpieces, and the label here is china dinnerware. And I noticed you got a pound instead of $1. Okay, cake is $3.50 per guest. The china dinnerware is $1.75. Table centerpieces are $13.25, but that's per table of 8. And finally, the chair covers are $2.50 per guest. And by the way, I'm getting all this information from the assignment requirements. All right, so we've done that. Instantiate them and then add them. Okay, then what I want to do is I need an instance of the checkbox listener. Because I have to wire each of my checkboxes to that listener. Okay, so a single instance of the listener, and it's going to listen for state changed events on each of the checkboxes. Okay, so they're wired together now. So let's go down here and finish my item listener. Now there's two approaches here. I could ask the event, well, where'd you come from? Which of these checkboxes were selected or deselected? So just like with the radio buttons on the reception package panel, I could ask, if source equals check stake, then enable or disable it. If source equals check cake, enable or disable it. Rather than doing that, having all those if statements, whenever any checkbox is selected or deselected, I'm going to change them all. Okay? So I'm just going to take the stake and say, all right, go get what your state is. Now that could be true or false. So I'm going to do that. Use that true or false value to set the associated data member of the plan. So query the view, get the value you need, and then use that to modify the model. And I'm going to do that for all 5. And I'm using just parallel construction here. So yes, it's a little redundant because I only really need to invoke one of these setters. But I'm trading that off with having to evaluate all those if statements. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. Okay, so that's pretty simple, straightforward. Now, there's one thing left to do here. And that's what happens when the user clicks the reset button. I just want to take you through the control flow once again. When the user clicks the reset button, the entire GUI is supposed to be reset to its default state. The reception plan is also required to be reset to its default state. Control flow goes as follows. When the reset button is clicked on the actions panel, the reset method of the plan is invoked. that reset method, reinitialize all the plan's data members, and then invokes reset on the iDo catering GUI instance. Okay, and the iDo catering GUI instance, if you'll recall, it's defined as a hierarchic collection of views. So what it does is it invokes reset on its child views, one of which is the services panel. And the services panel is in the middle of the GUI, and it consists of 3 child views. The one we just did, which was the reception packages panel, this one, and the reception charges panel. Each of these panels must also implement a reset method so we can reset the GUI components that are defined within it. So here we just create a simple reset method, and what that reset method, just going to take each of these checkboxes and set their selected value to false. Very simple, but necessary. Okay, so we've taken care of that. So that should finish our setup of our options panel. All right, now we got to go back up and modify the services panel to include now as a new child our reception options panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the way I added the reception packages panel. So I got a declaration, and in here I'm going to instantiate it. Send it to plan, and then below I'm going to add it. And then you'll see the services panel does have a definition for reset. So now it's asking its child reception packages to be reset. So I'm going to ask reception options to be reset as well. There we go. Now we've made all our changes. Let's test it out. Okay, let's look at this GUI now. Here's the panel we just added. So I'm basically just taking a look, make sure we got the labels correct. It's got its border and so forth. Okay, now let's do some testing. I'm just going to test everything, make sure I didn't break anything while I added something. All right, and let's go ahead and do them all, and then I'm going to click reset. And down here I want to make sure that when I click reset, not only does the panel get reset, that is, all my checkboxes are now deselected, but the associated data members are all set to false. All right, so that seemed to work just fine. All right, let's try it again. Now what I'm going to do is select them all and click apply. Why am I doing that? Well, when I click apply, we're going to compute all the reception plan charges. Well, many of those charges are based on the options selected. So I got to make sure that inside the reception plan, those associated data members are correctly assigned. All right, well, let's do some fiddling now. I'm going to take out 3 of them and click apply again to see if my reception plan got updated properly. So, yep, steak false, cake true, china false, centerpiece is true, chair covers false. Great. Let's do one more test and let's do another reset. All right, everybody set back to false. So I'm fairly confident now that I've addressed all the requirements that we said we were going to address in iteration 4. So we got one more, iteration 5, and then we'll be finished with this project.